Heading to marry his fiancée, the billionaire saw his ex at train station holding twins that looked like him. "Are you our father?" The question came from a 5-year-old boy standing in the middle of a moving train, his eyes carrying the kind of intelligence that misses nothing and forgives even less. Caleb Smith, the man worth $3.7 billion, the man who had cancelled his own wedding 47 minutes ago, stood frozen in a private compartment watching his entire existence rearrange itself around this single moment. Misty Knight sat across from him, her arms crossed, her expression carrying 6 years of survival and silence. She had built a life without him. She had raised these children without him. And now he was asking to be let in. "Mama says people are defined by what they do, not what they say." The boy continued, his voice steady and unimpressed by wealth or status. "What have you done?" Caleb looked at this child who had his grandmother's cheekbones and his father's stubborn chin. He looked at the little girl beside him clutching a purple dragon backpack, watching with eyes that held hope where her brother held suspicion. He looked at the woman he had destroyed and who had somehow built an empire of love from the ashes he left behind. "Nothing," Caleb admitted, his voice cracking on the word. "I have done nothing for you. Not yet. I am asking for the chance to start." The train rushed through Connecticut countryside while 3 people waited to see if a broken man could become something worth believing in. And in that suspended moment between past and possibility, everything hung on what would happen next. But to understand how we got here, to this train car hurtling toward Philadelphia with a cancelled wedding behind us and an uncertain future ahead, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to Platform 9 of Grand Central Terminal, where a billionaire's carefully constructed world shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The clock read 4:47 in the afternoon when Caleb Smith stepped onto the platform surrounded by the machinery of his perfect life. His assistant Marcus walked 2 steps behind, tablet in hand, confirming final arrangements for tomorrow's ceremony in the Hamptons. A wedding coordinator spoke rapidly into her phone about flower deliveries and seating charts. 2 security personnel maintained discreet distance while scanning the crowd for anything that might disrupt the schedule of a man whose time was worth approximately $12,000 per minute. Caleb wore a Brioni suit that cost more than most people earned in 6 months. His platinum watch caught the afternoon light filtering through the terminal's cathedral windows like a small sun strapped to his wrist. His posture spoke of a man who had conquered every arena he had ever entered. Real estate. Technology. Media holdings. At 34 years old, Caleb Smith commanded an empire that spanned 3 continents and employed over 40,000 people. He was 17 minutes away from boarding a train to his wedding. Tomorrow he would marry Tiffany Hartwell in front of 400 guests at a ceremony that had cost $2.5 million to produce. The flowers alone had required a dedicated cargo plane from the Netherlands. The champagne had been sourced from a vineyard that produced only 800 bottles per year. Every detail had been engineered for perfection because Caleb Smith did not do anything halfway. "Mr. Smith." Marcus appeared at his elbow. "The train departs in 12 minutes. We should begin boarding." Caleb nodded, his mind already moving to the next item on his mental checklist. The bachelor party last weekend had been tasteful and forgettable. The prenuptial agreement had been signed without drama. Tiffany understood the terms of their arrangement, and she had accepted them with the grace of a woman raised to understand that marriages among their class were mergers as much as love stories. It was a good match. Everyone said so. Their families had known each other for decades. Their assets complemented each other perfectly. Their combined influence would reshape the philanthropic landscape of the Eastern Seaboard. He should feel happy. Or at least satisfied. Instead, he felt the same hollow emptiness that had lived in his chest for 6 years, the vacancy he had learned to ignore through relentless work and careful emotional management. "Sir." Marcus prompted again. "We really should board." One moment. Caleb was not sure what made him turn. Perhaps it was a sound, a fragment of laughter that tugged at something buried deep in his memory. Perhaps it was simply the random firing of neurons that would later seem like fate. But he turned toward the opposite platform and his lungs forgot how to function. She stood 30 feet away, her dark curls pulled back in a hasty ponytail, wearing clothes that prioritized function over fashion. Misty Knight. The woman he had loved and lost and tried desperately to forget for 6 years. But it was not Misty that stopped his heart. It was the 2 children flanking her like small shadows. A boy and a girl. Perhaps 5 years old. The boy wore a serious expression that seemed almost comically mature for his age, his brow furrowed as he examined something on his tablet with analytical intensity. The girl clutched a purple backpack shaped like a dragon, her free hand wrapped around her mother's fingers. When the girl turned to say something to her brother, Caleb caught her profile. His grandmother's cheekbones. His father's stubborn chin. The particular shape of her ears that had been passed down through 4 generations of Smith men. The platform seemed to tilt beneath his feet. "Mr. Smith." Marcus's voice came from very far away. "Sir, are you all right? You have gone quite pale." Caleb did not answer. He was watching the boy now, studying the way he held himself, the angle of his jaw, the particular furrow between his eyebrows when he concentrated. Caleb saw that same expression in his mirror every morning. His legs moved before his brain gave permission. He was walking across the platform, then jogging, weaving through the crowd of commuters and travelers with single-minded focus. Behind him, Marcus called out in confusion. The security team scrambled to follow. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except reaching the woman who had disappeared from his life 6 years ago and the children who looked exactly like him. Misty was helping the kids onto a bench, digging through a bag for something. Snacks, probably. Children always needed snacks. He remembered that from somewhere, some article he had read about parenting during one of those late nights when sleep would not come and his mind wandered to lives he might have lived. His shadow fell across her before he could figure out what to say. She looked up. Their eyes met. And for one crystalline moment, time suspended itself. The terminal noise faded. The bustling crowds became irrelevant background static. There was only Misty Knight, looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. Shock, certainly. But also something harder. Something that looked like the carefully maintained composure of a woman who had prepared for this moment without ever believing it would actually arrive. Misty. His voice came out rough, cracked, nothing like the polished instrument he used in boardrooms and negotiations. Caleb. She kept her voice neutral, controlled. What are you doing here? But his eyes were not on her anymore. They were fixed on the children, moving between their faces like he was solving an equation that kept giving him impossible answers. The boy looked up from his tablet, assessing Caleb with the kind of evaluating stare that made adults uncomfortable. The girl pressed closer to her mother's side, suddenly shy in the presence of this intense stranger. Who are they? Caleb managed, though he already knew. The math was simple. The evidence was written on their faces. These are my children. Misty pulled them closer, her arm encircling them protectively. King and Kyra. How old? 5. Their birthday is in March. He counted backward. March. 5 years ago. 9 months before that would have been June. The month everything between them had combusted. The month she had disappeared from his life without explanation or forwarding address. They are mine. It was not a question. Something flashed in Misty's eyes. Anger, old and carefully preserved. Biologically? Yes. In every other way that actually matters. That is a different conversation entirely. Mr. Smith. Marcus had finally caught up, slightly breathless. Sir, the train departs in 8 minutes. We really must board or we will miss the connection and the entire wedding schedule will be disrupted. Caleb did not look at him. He could not tear his eyes away from the children. His children. 2 human beings who had existed for 5 years without his knowledge. 2 people who carried his DNA and his features and absolutely none of his presence in their lives. Mama? The little girl's voice cut through the adult tension. Her voice was sweet and curious and slightly worried. Who is this man? Why does he look so sad? Something cracked open in Caleb's chest. A fissure that had been sealed for 6 years, holding back everything he had refused to feel. This child, his daughter, was asking why a stranger looked sad. And the answer was that he had just realized he had missed everything. First words. First steps. First days of school. Every birthday. Every nightmare. Every moment that mattered. He is someone I used to know. Misty said carefully, her hand moving to stroke Kyra's hair. A long time ago. Before you were born. Before us? The boy asked. King. His son was named King. Was that a statement? A hope? A challenge? Yes, baby. Before you. Caleb finally found his voice, though it sounded foreign to his own ears. Can we talk? Somewhere private? There is a lounge upstairs. I have access. I have a train to catch in 6 minutes. Misty cut him off, her voice carrying an edge that brooked no negotiation. We are going to Philadelphia. My mother is sick and I cannot miss visiting hours. Then I will come with you. Misty stared at him like he had suggested they fly to the moon. I will buy a ticket. Caleb continued, the words tumbling out with an urgency he had not felt since his first major business pitch, back when he still had something to prove. 3 hours each way. That is 6 hours. 6 hours for you to explain what I am looking at and for me to understand how I have children I never knew existed. Sir. Marcus interjected, his voice strained with the effort of remaining professional while his employer's life imploded. What about the train to the Hamptons? What about the wedding? Tiffany is expecting you tonight for the rehearsal dinner. Caleb turned to his assistant, and something in his expression made Marcus take a step backward. Cancel it. Cancel the rehearsal dinner. Cancel everything. The train. The wedding. All of it. The words hung in the air like a bomb detonating in slow motion. Marcus's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion. Disbelief. The dawning horror of someone realizing they would have to deliver catastrophic news to very powerful people. The wedding, sir. There are 400 guests arriving tomorrow. The flowers alone cost. I do not care what it costs. Caleb's gaze remained locked on Misty, on the children, on the life he had somehow missed entirely. Handle it. Make whatever excuses you need. Family emergency. Sudden illness. I do not care what you tell them. Just make it go away. Sir, Tiffany's father is one of our largest investors. If you cancel this wedding, the business implications alone. There are more important things than business. The statement shocked everyone, including Caleb himself. He had never said those words before. He was not sure he had ever believed them before. But looking at King and Kyra, at the faces that were undeniably his, he understood that something fundamental had shifted. You are serious. Misty said quietly. You would actually cancel your wedding. 4 people you met 5 minutes ago. I would cancel everything. Caleb replied. For the chance to understand what I am looking at right now. For the chance to know them. If you will let me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 6 years of history and hurt. King watched his mother's face with that analytical intensity Caleb was beginning to recognize as inherited. Kyra clutched her dragon backpack tighter, sensing the weight of the adult moment happening over her head. Fine. Misty finally said. But ground rules. You do not touch them without permission. You do not make promises you cannot keep. And if they are uncomfortable at any point, this conversation ends and you walk away. Understood? Understood. Absolutely. Whatever you need. She studied him for a long moment, searching for something in his face. Sincerity, perhaps. Or the cracks that would reveal this as another performance. Our train leaves in 4 minutes. She finally said. If you are coming, you better buy a ticket fast. Caleb turned to Marcus, who stood frozen in a state of professional shock. Handle everything. He said. I will contact you when I know more. Sir, what should I tell Tiffany? Tell her the truth. Tell her I saw my children's faces and understood that everything I have been building was hollow. Tell her she deserves someone who can give her their whole heart, and I never could. He did not wait for Marcus's response. He was already moving toward the ticket counter, pulling out his phone to complete the purchase digitally, desperate not to miss the train that would carry him toward answers he had not known he was missing. Misty gathered the children and headed toward their platform. She did not look back to see if he was following. She did not need to. She could feel his presence behind her like heat from a fire. Mama. King's voice was quiet but clear. Is that man going to ride the train with us? Yes, baby. Misty replied. Just for today. Why? Because there are some conversations that cannot wait any longer. King processed this with visible skepticism. He does not look like he belongs on a regular train. He looks like he belongs on a private plane or something. Despite everything, despite the chaos and the confusion and the 6 years of carefully maintained anger, Misty felt her lips twitch toward a smile. Her son saw too much. He always had. You are right. She admitted. He does belong on a private plane. But today, he is going to learn what it feels like to travel like the rest of us. They boarded the train as the final boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Caleb followed, his bespoke suit attracting curious glances from the other passengers. He looked exactly like what he was. A billionaire who had just made the first impulsive decision of his carefully controlled life. The private compartment cost more than most people's monthly rent. Caleb had insisted, claiming they needed privacy for the conversation ahead. Misty had agreed only because the alternative was having this discussion surrounded by strangers, and she was not sure she could maintain her composure in public. The children settled by the window immediately. King pressed his face against the glass, watching the platform slide away as the train began to move. Kyra arranged her collection of tiny dragon figurines on the fold-down table, creating elaborate formations that seemed to follow rules only she understood. Caleb sat across from Misty, looking like a man facing his own execution. The confidence that usually radiated from him had evaporated. In its place was something raw and uncertain, a vulnerability she had never seen in all the time they were together. The train picked up speed, carrying them away from Grand Central, away from the Hamptons' wedding that would not happen, away from the life Caleb had been sleepwalking through for 6 years. I do not know where to start. He admitted. Start with why you were at Grand Central. Misty kept her arms crossed, her posture defensive. You live in Manhattan. You have private drivers and probably private helicopters. Train stations are not exactly your territory. A muscle twitched in his jaw. I was supposed to be getting married. Tomorrow. Hampton's wedding, 400 guests, the whole extravagant production. Supposed to be. I cancelled it. About 20 minutes ago. Misty stared at him. You cancelled your wedding because you saw me at a train station? I cancelled it because I saw them. His gaze moved to the children again, hungry with a longing that made something twist in her chest. The moment I looked at those faces, I knew. I do not know how I knew, but I knew. And I could not walk onto that train toward a life that was built on not knowing they existed. What about your fiancée? Misty asked. Does she not deserve better than being abandoned an hour before her rehearsal dinner? Tiffany deserves honesty. Caleb said quietly. Which she was not getting from me. I was marrying her because she was safe. Because she did not challenge me, did not push me to be better, did not expect me to show up emotionally. I was repeating old patterns. Choosing comfort over connection. He paused, his eyes meeting hers with painful directness. Sound familiar? The words landed like a punch. Because yes, it sounded exactly like the reason he had chosen someone else over Misty all those years ago. The parallel was not lost on either of them. The train rushed through the Bronx, the urban landscape blurring past the window. King had abandoned his view to examine the compartment's fixtures with engineering interest. Kyra continued her dragon arrangement, humming softly to herself. Why did you not tell me? The question erupted from Caleb, raw with years of suppressed pain. 5 years, Misty. 5 years I did not know I had children. Because you had already shown me exactly what kind of father you would be. The words came out harder than she intended, carrying the weight of old wounds that had never fully healed. You chose someone else. 3 weeks after promising me forever, you were with Vanessa at that charity gala, and everyone in our circle knew about it except me. I had to find out from Instagram, Caleb. Instagram. He flinched like she had struck him. I was different then. Broken in ways I did not even recognize. I thought achievement could substitute for actually living. I thought success in business meant success in everything. Pretty words. But I had heard your pretty words before. They did not mean much when actions told a different story. Mama. King's voice cut through the adult conversation with childlike precision. He had abandoned his examination of the compartment fixtures and was watching them with unsettling attention. You are fighting. Your voice only sounds like that when you are really hurt. Misty closed her eyes briefly, collecting herself. She had promised herself she would not do this. Would not let old bitterness poison the air around her children. We are not fighting, baby. We are just discussing. Adults sometimes have complicated things to talk about. It sounds like fighting. Kyra observed, not looking up from her dragons. Your voice gets all sharp. Like when King takes my crayons. I do not take your crayons. King protested. I borrow them. There is a difference. There is no difference if you do not give them back. Despite the tension, despite the impossibility of the situation, Misty felt her lips twitch toward a smile. Her children had a gift for cutting through adult complexity with their matter-of-fact observations. Caleb was watching this exchange with naked wonder. They are perfect. He breathed. How did you do this alone? How did you raise them to be so articulate, confident, kind? Misty allowed herself a moment of pride. I did whatever I had to do. I worked 3 jobs the first 2 years. I finished my nursing degree online while they napped. I built a life from absolute nothing, Caleb. No family money. No safety net. No partner to share the load. Just me and them against the world. I would have helped. If I had known. Would you have? Her laugh held no humor. Or would you have thrown money at the situation and considered your obligations fulfilled? Would you have actually shown up for 3 a.m. feedings and first steps and ear infections that lasted weeks? Or would fatherhood have been one more thing you delegated when it got inconvenient? The questions hung in the air, indictments dressed as inquiries. I do not know. Caleb admitted finally. I do not know who I would have been 5 years ago if you had told me. Maybe exactly the absent, check-writing father you feared. But Misty, I am not that person anymore. I have spent years in therapy examining why I chose destruction over devotion, why I sabotaged the best relationship I ever had. I have done the work, even when I did not know what I was working toward. And now you think one train ride earns you access to their lives? No. His voice was quiet, certain. I think it earns me the right to ask for a chance. Nothing more. The chance to prove I can be present. Consistent. Worthy of knowing them. Before Misty could respond, King appeared at Caleb's knee, examining him with unsettling intensity. The boy had moved so quietly neither adult had noticed his approach. Are you our father? The question was delivered with the directness of someone who had no use for adult evasion. 5 words that cut through 6 years of secrets and silence. Caleb looked to Misty for permission to answer. She hesitated, the protective instinct that had governed her every decision for 5 years warring with something else. Something that recognized her children had a right to know the truth. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. Yes. Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion he was trying to contain. I am. I did not know you existed until about an hour ago, which means I missed the first 5 years of your lives. That is time I can never get back, and I am sorrier about it than I know how to explain. King processed this with visible consideration, his young face cycling through emotions that seemed too complex for a 5-year-old. Confusion. Calculation. And something that looked almost like judgment. Mama says people are defined by what they do, not what they say. King replied finally. What have you done? Caleb actually smiled. A genuine expression that transformed his entire face, making him look younger, less guarded. Your mother is absolutely right. And honestly, I have not done anything yet. Not for you. I am asking for the chance to start. Kyra had abandoned her dragons and drifted over to join her brother, standing slightly behind him like he was her shield. She studied Caleb with eyes that held none of her brother's suspicion. You look sad. She observed. Like you lost something important. I did. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. I lost you. Both of you. For 5 whole years. That is a lot of losing. King and Kyra exchanged one of those silent twin communications that parents learn to recognize but never fully understand. We will think about it. King declared with the seriousness of someone making a corporate decision. Whether you can be our dad. It is not something we can just decide right now. That is completely fair. Caleb agreed. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere. The children seemed satisfied with this answer. Kyra returned to her dragons. King fixed Caleb with one more evaluating look before settling into the seat beside his mother. The train continued its journey through Connecticut, the landscape outside shifting from urban density to suburban sprawl to the first hints of autumn countryside. Inside the private compartment, the atmosphere had shifted too. The initial confrontation had given way to something more tentative. The beginning of a conversation that would take much longer than a train ride to complete. Can you tell me about them? Caleb asked quietly. What they like. What they are good at. Who they are. I have missed so much. Misty studied him for a long moment, searching for the trap, the angle, the way this would eventually hurt her. But all she saw was a man who looked like he was trying very hard not to cry. King wants to be an architect. She said finally. He has been obsessed with buildings since he could stack blocks. He draws blueprints for fun. He went to an engineering camp last summer and came home talking about cantilevers for 3 weeks straight. Something lit up in Caleb's eyes. I studied engineering in college. Before I switched to business. The physics of load-bearing walls and foundation stress distribution. He looked at King with new appreciation. I would love to talk to you about cantilevers sometime. If you want. King's head turned, his interest obviously caught despite his determination to remain skeptical. You know about cantilevers? I do. They are architectural elements that project horizontally into space, supported only on one end. They are used in balconies and diving boards and some really incredible modern buildings. Frank Lloyd Wright used them. King said, testing. In falling water. He did. That house is an engineering marvel. The cantilevers extend over the waterfall without any visible supports beneath them. It should not work according to conventional thinking, but the math makes it possible. I want to see it someday. King admitted. Mama showed me pictures but it is not the same as being there. Maybe we could go. Caleb offered, then caught himself, glancing at Misty. If that would be okay. Someday. When you are comfortable with me. King considered this. We will see. But something had shifted. The wall of suspicion had developed its first crack. Misty watched her analytical son find unexpected common ground with the father he had never known, and she felt that thing in her chest twist again. What about Kyra? Caleb asked. What does she love? Dragons. Misty smiled despite herself. Everything dragons. She has been building an entire mythology since she was 3. There are good dragons and bad dragons and dragons who are learning to be good. She writes stories about them and draws pictures and makes me read them at bedtime. Kyra looked up from her figurine arrangement, clearly pleased to be the topic of discussion. My favorite is Queen Amethyst. She protects the Dragon Kingdom from invaders. She is purple because purple is the color of royalty and magic. That sounds like a very important dragon. Caleb said seriously, treating her imagination with the same respect he would give a business proposition. Does she have any friends? She has a whole court. Kyra warmed to the subject immediately. There is Sir Obsidian who guards the treasure and Lady Sapphire who heals the wounded and Prince Jade who is learning to be brave even though he is scared. Being brave when you are scared is the only kind of bravery that counts. Caleb said quietly. Anyone can be brave when there is nothing to fear. It is when you are terrified and you do it anyway that it matters. Kyra beamed at him. That is what Mama says too. Your mama is very wise. Misty felt the compliment land despite her defenses. She had spent 5 years being both parents, being the entire world for these 2 children. To hear someone acknowledge the wisdom she had tried to impart, even in such a small way, touched something she had not realized was hungry for recognition. The train attendant appeared with a beverage cart, breaking the moment. Caleb ordered coffee. Misty asked for tea. The children debated the merits of apple juice versus orange juice with the intensity of diplomats negotiating a treaty. When the attendant had moved on, Caleb returned to his questions. Tell me about your life. He said to Misty. Not just about them. About you. What happened after you left New York? The question opened a door she had kept firmly closed. The memories of those first months, those first years, the sheer terror and exhaustion and desperate determination that had defined her survival. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after I left. Misty said, her voice carefully neutral. I was alone in Philadelphia with nothing. No job. No insurance. No support system. My mother was working double shifts just to keep her own head above water. There was no one to help. Why did you not call me? Because I had just watched you choose someone else over me. Because I found out about you and Vanessa from Instagram comments while I was still trying to understand why you had suddenly gone cold. Because I could not trust that you would not make our child feel the same disposability I felt. The words hit Caleb like physical blows. Each one deserved. I got a job at a diner. Misty continued. Worked until I was 8 months pregnant and my feet were so swollen I could barely stand. Had the twins early, spent 2 weeks in the NICU, racked up medical debt I am still paying off. Took 3 jobs when they were 6 months old. Finished my nursing degree online during their naps. Spent 4 years working night shifts so I could be with them during the day. She paused, gathering the threads of a story that still felt impossible even though she had lived it. The other single mothers at the daycare became my support system. We took turns watching each other's kids. We shared groceries when money was tight. We held each other up through the impossible moments. And you did all of that alone. Caleb said. While I was building an empire and planning a wedding and having absolutely no idea that the most important thing I could have done with my life was right here. Misty did not respond. There was nothing to say that would not sound like accusation or absolution, and she was not ready to offer either. The train passed through New Haven, the Yale campus visible briefly before the landscape resumed its blur of towns and trees. They were over halfway to Philadelphia now. The conversation that had started as confrontation had mellowed into something else. Not reconciliation. It was far too early for that. But perhaps the beginning of understanding. I need you to know something. Caleb said as they crossed into New York. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. What I did to you, choosing Vanessa, disappearing emotionally before I disappeared physically, that was unforgivable. I knew it then and I know it now. Then what are you asking for? A chance. Just a chance to show that I can be different. Not as your partner. That ship has sailed. I understand that. But as their father. I want to be present for them in a way I never was for you. Misty considered this. The man before her looked different from the one she remembered. Older, obviously. But also somehow more worn. The sharp edges of his confidence had been smoothed by something. Failure, maybe. Or just the slow erosion of a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty from within. Before we continue with this pivotal conversation that is about to reshape 3 lives forever, I need to pause and speak directly to you. When I started Mr. Dawson Stories, I wanted to create a space where we could explore the messy, complicated reality of love, forgiveness, and second chances. Not fairy tales. Real stories about real people navigating impossible situations. You are here because something about Caleb and Misty's journey resonates with you. Maybe you have been betrayed. Maybe you have been the one who made the mistake. Maybe you are just trying to figure out if broken things can ever truly be fixed. If this story is speaking to you, hit that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible. That strength can come from devastation. That our worst moments do not have to define our entire story. Subscribe if you have not already because this is just the beginning. And trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Now, back to this train somewhere in Connecticut where 2 adults are trying to explain the inexplicable to 2 children who deserve better than excuses. The train pulled into 30th Street Station as the sun began its descent toward the Philadelphia skyline. The transition from the luxury compartment to the bustling platform felt like crossing between worlds. King and Kyra gathered their belongings with the practiced efficiency of children who had learned early that waiting for adults meant missing out on interesting things. Misty shouldered her bag, one hand automatically reaching for Kyra's while King walked ahead with determined independence. Caleb followed, his bespoke suit attracting curious glances from the commuters rushing past. He looked exactly like what he was. A man who did not belong here but was determined to stay anyway. In the pickup area, a beat-up Honda waited with a woman behind the wheel. She had the look of someone who had seen too much and still chosen kindness anyway. Her eyes widened when she saw Caleb emerge behind Misty and the children. "Girl!" The woman called out the window. "You want to explain why you got a whole entire billionaire following you through the train station?" "Janice, not now." Misty replied, but there was no real heat in it. "Long story. I will call you tonight." The children piled into the back seat, already bickering about who got the window. Caleb stood awkwardly on the curb, suddenly uncertain. "The hotel is that way," Misty said, pointing toward Center City. "There are several nice ones near Rittenhouse Square." "Can I see them again?" Caleb asked. "Before I go back to New York." Misty considered. The protective part of her wanted to say no. Wanted to retreat to the safety of the life she had built without him. But she had watched him on that train. Watched him talk to King about architecture and listen to Kyra's dragon mythology and treat both children with a respect that seemed genuine. "Lunch tomorrow," she said finally. "Noon. There is a diner on Sansom Street called Marie's. We will meet you there." "Thank you." The words came out rough with emotion. "Misty, I know I have not earned anything from you. But I promise you, I will spend however long it takes proving that I can be what they need. Time will tell." She replied, then got into the car without looking back. As they pulled away from the curb, Kyra pressed her face against the window, watching the figure of her father grow smaller in the distance. "Mama?" she asked. "Is he going to come back tomorrow?" "He said he would." King made a skeptical sound from the other side of the back seat. "People say lots of things. It is what they do that matters." Out of the mouths of children, Misty thought. Her son had been listening more carefully than she realized to the lessons she had been teaching. "Let us give him a chance to show us what he does," she said carefully. "And then we will decide how we feel about it." It was all she could offer. All any of them could offer at this point. Caleb stood on the curb until the Honda disappeared into Philadelphia traffic. Then he pulled out his phone, which had been buzzing insistently for the entire train ride. 47 missed calls. 214 text messages. News alerts that made his stomach drop. Smith wedding cancelled. Sources say groom disappeared hours before rehearsal. Tiffany Hartwell devastated as billionaire fiancé vanishes. What secrets is Caleb Smith hiding? He scrolled through the notifications with a kind of detached fascination. His old life was imploding in real time, and he found he could not bring himself to care about any of it. There was only one thing that mattered now. He opened his email and began composing a message to his executive team. Effective immediately, I am delegating all operational decisions for the next 2 weeks to the executive committee. I will be unreachable except for absolute emergencies. Do not contact me unless the building is literally on fire. He hesitated over the send button for only a moment before pressing it. Then he walked toward Rittenhouse Square to find a hotel and prepare for the most important lunch meeting of his life. The hotel room was obscenely expensive and utterly meaningless. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed, still in his suit, watching the Philadelphia skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that seemed designed to make the occupant feel powerful and important. He felt neither. His phone continued its relentless buzzing. Tiffany's messages had progressed from confused to frantic to furious over the course of the evening. "Caleb, where are you? The rehearsal starts in 2 hours. Marcus says you canceled the wedding. This is some kind of joke, right? Caleb, answer your phone. If you do not call me back in the next hour, my father is going to destroy you." He should respond. He knew that. She deserved an explanation, even if he did not have the words to give one. But every time he tried to compose a message, his mind returned to King's evaluating stare and Kyra's purple dragons and Misty's quiet dignity. Finally, his phone showed an incoming call from a number he could not ignore. Tiffany's father. Robert Hartwell. One of his largest investors and a man known for destroying those who crossed him. Caleb answered. "Smith." Robert's voice was cold and controlled, the voice of a man who wielded power like a scalpel. "I am going to give you exactly one chance to explain what the hell is happening before I unleash every resource at my disposal to ruin you. Robert." Caleb's voice was steady despite everything. "I understand you are upset." "Upset? My daughter has been crying for 4 hours. I have 400 guests who received cancellation notices that my staff did not authorize. The media is running wild with speculation. And you have the audacity to tell me I am upset. I understand. Then explain. Now. Caleb took a breath. There was no version of this conversation that ended well. But there was a version that was honest, and he had spent too many years choosing comfortable lies over difficult truths. I have children. He said. I found out today. Twins. 5 years old. I never knew they existed. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Children. Robert repeated flatly. Yes. With a woman I was in a relationship with before Tiffany. Before I built the company. Before everything. And this is supposed to excuse abandoning my daughter at the altar? Nothing excuses it. Caleb replied. I am not trying to excuse it. I am telling you the truth. I saw my children for the first time today, and I realized that I could not marry Tiffany. Not because of anything wrong with her, but because I have never been able to give her what she deserves. My whole heart. Your whole heart. Robert's voice dripped with contempt. You think this is about romance? This was a merger, Smith. A strategic alliance between families. And you have just sabotaged it for some woman who shows up with a sob story and 2 brats she claims are yours. Do not. Caleb's voice went dangerously quiet. Do not talk about my children like that. Your children. You have known them for 5 hours. You are going to throw away everything you have built, everything we have built together, for people who are functionally strangers. They are not strangers. They are my blood. And for the first time in 6 years, I feel like I am awake. I feel like I am making a choice that actually matters. Robert laughed, but there was no humor in it. You have made a very powerful enemy tonight, Caleb. I hope your newfound family is worth it. The line went dead. Caleb set the phone down on the nightstand and stared at it for a long moment. Then he stood, walked to the minibar, and poured himself a drink he did not actually want. The phone buzzed again. A text from Tiffany this time. My father just called me. He told me what you said. About the children. Then another message. I could have worked with that, you know. Children from a previous relationship. That is manageable. We could have figured something out. And another. But you did not even give me the chance. You just decided. Like I was not even a factor in your own life. Caleb read the messages twice. She was right. He had made a unilateral decision about their shared future without consulting her. It was exactly the kind of behavior he was trying to change. But he also knew that no version of that conversation would have ended differently. The moment he saw King and Kyra, he had understood that his life with Tiffany was over. It had probably never really started. He typed back carefully. You are right. I did not handle this correctly. But I also need you to understand something. The children are not the only reason I cannot marry you. They are the reason I finally admitted what I have known for months. That I have been sleepwalking through our relationship. That I was choosing you because you were safe, not because I loved you the way you deserve to be loved. The response came quickly. So I was just a placeholder. Someone to keep you company until something better came along. No. You were someone I genuinely cared about. But caring is not enough for marriage. And I would rather hurt you now than spend 50 years slowly disappointing you. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, a response. I do not know whether to hate you or thank you for being honest finally. You can do both. Caleb replied. I deserve both. There were no more messages after that. He finished the drink he did not want and tried to sleep. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw King's evaluating stare. Kyra's purple dragons. Misty's carefully maintained composure cracking just enough to show the pain beneath. At 2 a.m, he gave up on sleep and spent the rest of the night researching child development, single-parent households, and the psychology of building relationships with children who have absent fathers. By the time the sun rose over Philadelphia, he had read 18 articles, watched 7 videos, and felt more unprepared than he had before he started. There was no playbook for this. No strategy document. No quarterly targets or key performance indicators. There was just a lunch at a diner and the terrifying possibility of being exactly who he needed to be. The diner was everything his usual haunts were not. Formica countertops and vinyl booths. Handwritten specials on a whiteboard. The smell of coffee and bacon and something that might have been homemade pie. A bell above the door that announced his arrival to everyone inside. Caleb had dressed down as much as his wardrobe allowed. A button-down shirt without a jacket. Slacks that cost less than his usual socks. He still looked like money, but at least it was not shouting quite as loudly. Misty was already there with the children, seated in a corner booth that gave her a clear view of both the entrance and the exit. A survival instinct, he realized. She had probably sat that way in every restaurant for 5 years. Always aware. Always ready to protect. King noticed him first, his eyes tracking Caleb's approach with that unsettling analytical gaze. Kyra was drawing on her placemat, a purple crayon gripped in determined fingers. "You came," Misty said as he slid into the booth across from her. Her tone suggested this was not a foregone conclusion. "I said I would. People say lots of things." She echoed her son's words from the night before. "It is what they do that matters." Caleb nodded, accepting the test. "Then I will spend today doing. Showing up. Being present. And if you will let me, I will do the same thing tomorrow. And the day after that." He reached into the bag he had brought, pulling out 2 wrapped packages. He slid them across the table, one to each child. "I brought you something," he said. "But I want to be clear about something first. I am not trying to buy your affection. Your mother and I agreed that gifts should be meaningful, not excessive. So these are small, but I thought you might like them." King opened his package carefully, peeling back the paper like it might be booby-trapped. Inside was a book about famous architects throughout history. His eyes went wide. "This has Frank Lloyd Wright," he said. "And Zaha Hadid. And I.M.Pei. And about 50 others." Caleb said. "I thought maybe you would like to learn about the people who built the buildings you admire." Kyra had torn into her package with less caution. Inside was a sketchbook with an embossed dragon on the cover and a set of high-quality colored pencils. "These are the good pencils," Kyra breathed. "The ones from the art store that Mama says are too expensive." Misty felt her throat tighten. She had mentioned those pencils exactly once, months ago, when they had passed an art supply store and Kyra had pressed her face against the window. How had he known? "I asked Janice," Caleb admitted, catching her expression. "Your friend. I found her on social media last night and sent her a message asking what the children might like. She was skeptical but helpful." "You stalked my friend on social media." "I prefer the term strategic outreach." Despite herself, Misty laughed. It was a small sound, quickly suppressed, but it was real. And it was the first time in 6 years that Caleb Smith had made her laugh. "Thank you," King said, still examining his book. "This is actually really thoughtful." "You are welcome. We are still thinking about whether you can be our dad," King continued, looking up from the pages. "But this is a good start." The waitress appeared, a middle-aged woman named Doris who called everyone honey and refilled coffee without being asked. They ordered breakfast. Pancakes for the children. Eggs and toast for Misty. Coffee, black, for Caleb, who was too nervous to eat anything substantial. The conversation flowed more easily than anyone expected. King asked questions about architecture that Caleb actually knew the answers to. Kyra insisted on showing him her current dragon story, which involved a princess who was also a dragon who was learning to accept both parts of herself. "She is struggling with identity," Kyra explained seriously. "Because some people think dragons are scary and some people think princesses are weak. But she is both and neither at the same time." "That sounds like a very complicated character," Caleb replied with equal seriousness. "How does she resolve it?" "She does not resolve it," Kyra said. "She learns to live with it. That is the whole point." Caleb looked at Misty with something like awe. "Did you teach her that?" Misty shook her head. "She figured that out on her own. She has been working on that story for almost a year." I am going to write it into a real book someday. Kyra announced. With pictures and everything. And it is going to help other kids who feel like they are both and neither at the same time. The breakfast ended too soon. The children were getting restless, ready for movement and adventure and anything other than sitting in a diner booth. Can we go to the park? Kyra asked. The one with the good swings. We should get to the hospital. Misty said. Grandma is expecting us. I want to come. The words were out of Caleb's mouth before he could stop them. To the hospital. If that is okay. I would like to meet your mother. Misty's expression shuddered immediately. The warm, almost friendly atmosphere of the breakfast vanished, replaced by the guarded woman who had learned never to trust anyone with her heart. That is a big step. She said carefully. I know. But I also know that your mother is important to you and to them. And if I am going to be part of their lives, I should know the people who matter to them. She will interrogate you. Misty warned. She will ask questions you do not want to answer and she will not accept pretty words as substitutes for real truth. I would expect nothing less. Caleb replied. If she raised you, she is obviously a formidable woman. Misty studied him for a long moment, that evaluating gaze so reminiscent of their sons. Fine. She said finally. But if she tells you to leave, you leave. No arguments. No arguments. Caleb agreed. Her house, her rules. The hospital was nothing like the facilities Caleb was used to. No private suites. No personal attendants. Just a public room with curtains for privacy and the constant beeping of machines monitoring vital signs. Misty's mother sat propped up in the bed, looking tired but alert. She had her daughter's cheekbones and her grandson's evaluating gaze and an air of someone who had survived too much to be impressed by anything anymore. Grandma. Kyra launched herself at the bed, carefully avoiding the foreline. We brought someone. I can see that. The older woman said, her eyes fixed on Caleb. So. You are the one. Yes, ma'am. Caleb replied. I am. The children were ushered to the visitors' lounge by Misty, who understood that this conversation needed to happen without their ears present. They went reluctantly, King looking back over his shoulder with that analytical gaze that seemed to absorb everything. When they were gone, the grandmother spoke again. Sit down. She commanded. You look like a lawyer standing there all stiff. I may be dying but I am not going to bite you. You are not dying. Misty corrected. Not yet anyway. The grandmother agreed. But the way these doctors talk, you would think every sniffle is a death sentence. She turned back to Caleb. So. You finally showed up. Only took you 5 years. I did not know. Caleb said simply. That is not an excuse. That is just the truth. HM. The grandmother made a sound that could have been skepticism or acknowledgement or both. And now that you know. What exactly do you plan to do about it? Whatever she will let me. Caleb glanced at Misty, who stood with her arms crossed near the door. I want to be part of their lives. Really part of it. Not just birthday cards and holiday visits. Present. Consistent. The father I should have been from the beginning. Pretty words. The grandmother said, echoing her daughter. But I have been around a long time, young man. I have seen a lot of men with pretty words. Most of them disappeared the moment things got difficult. I understand your skepticism. I have not earned any trust yet. But I am hoping you will give me the chance to earn it. The grandmother studied him for a long moment, her gaze as penetrating as her grandson's. My husband left when Misty was 3. She said finally. Just walked out one day and never came back. No explanation. No apology. No child support. Just gone. I am sorry. I am not telling you so you can be sorry. I am telling you so you understand what you are up against. My daughter learned early that men leave. She learned it again when you chose someone else. She has spent 5 years building a life that does not depend on anyone but herself. And now you are asking her to trust you. To let you into that fortress she has built around those children. The grandmother leaned forward, ignoring the machines that beeped in protest. I need you to understand something. If you let those children start loving you and then you disappear, you will not just be hurting them. You will be proving every fear their mother has ever had. You will be completing a cycle of abandonment that goes back generations. And if that happens, I will find a way to make your life very unpleasant, dying or not. Caleb met her gaze steadily. I understand. And I am not going to disappear. Time will tell. The grandmother said. But I will tell you this. I have watched a lot of men in my life. The ones who are all talk, they cannot hold eye contact when you challenge them. You have not looked away once. It was not a blessing. It was barely even acknowledgement. But from a woman who had every reason to distrust him, it was enough. All right. The grandmother said. You can visit again. But bring better flowers next time. The ones from the hospital gift shop are pathetic. Caleb looked down at the small bouquet he had grabbed from the lobby on his way in. She was right. They were pathetic. Yes, ma'am. He agreed. Better flowers. I can do that. A hint of a smile crossed the grandmother's face before she turned to Misty. He might be all right. She said. Too early to tell. But he might be. It was the closest thing to approval Misty had ever heard her mother give to anyone. And watching Caleb accept the challenge without flinching, she felt something shift in her chest. Something that might have been the first crack in a wall she had built to last forever. We should go. She said. Let you rest. The children were retrieved from the visitors' lounge, where King had been studying the hospital's floor plan and Kyra had been drawing dragons in her new sketchbook. The walk to the parking lot was quiet. The children ran ahead, burning off energy that had been constrained too long. Misty and Caleb walked side by side, not touching, but closer than they had been on the train. Your mother is formidable. Caleb said finally. She has had to be. Misty replied. She raised me alone. She helped me raise them alone. She has never had the luxury of being anything less than strong. They reached the car. The children piled in, arguing about something inconsequential in the way siblings do. Misty paused with her hand on the door. You did well today. She said quietly. With them. With her. It was not what I expected. What did you expect? Honestly? For you to fail. To prove that I was right to keep them from you. To confirm everything I believed about who you are. And now? Now I am less sure. Which is terrifying, if I am being honest. I had made peace with hating you. It was clean and simple. This is messy. Messy is usually where growth happens. Caleb replied. At least, that is what my therapist keeps telling me. You have a therapist? For 4 years now. Every week. Unpacking why I chose destruction over devotion, as I mentioned. It has been humbling and painful and completely necessary. Misty studied him. The man before her was not the same man who had broken her heart 6 years ago. He was softer somehow, despite the sharpness of his features. More willing to be uncertain. More comfortable with not having all the answers. I am going back to New York tomorrow. Caleb said. But I want to come back next weekend. And the weekend after that. I want to build something with them. Slowly. Consistently. If you will let me. I will think about it. That is all I am asking. She got into the car. He watched her drive away, standing in the hospital parking lot until the taillights disappeared. Then he pulled out his phone and began making arrangements. There was an empire to restructure. A life to rebuild. A family to earn. And for the first time in 6 years, Caleb Smith felt like he knew exactly what he was working toward. The weeks that followed tested every promise Caleb had made. Returning to New York felt like stepping into a life that no longer fit. His Manhattan penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and museum-quality art and complete absence of warmth, seemed to mock him. He walked through rooms that cost more than most people earned in a decade and felt nothing but the echoing emptiness of choices made for the wrong reasons. The business fallout was immediate and brutal. Robert Hartwell made good on his threats within 48 hours of Caleb's return. Strategic leaks to financial journalists painted Caleb as unstable, impulsive, a liability to any serious investor. Partners who had been loyal for years suddenly found reasons to reconsider their positions. Board members who had rubber-stamped his every decision began asking pointed questions about leadership stability. The stock price wavered. Not crashed, but wavered. And in the world Caleb inhabited, wavering was often the beginning of a freefall. His first board meeting since the cancelled wedding felt like walking into a firing squad. Mr. Smith. Harrison Cole, the longest-serving board member, spoke with the careful diplomacy of someone preparing to deliver bad news. We appreciate you joining us today. There are some concerns we need to address. Caleb took his seat at the head of the table, the position he had occupied for 8 years. The faces around him were familiar but their expressions were not. These were people who had celebrated his successes and profited from his vision. Now they looked at him like he was a problem to be managed. I am aware of the concerns. Caleb replied calmly. I am prepared to address them. The situation with Robert Hartwell is significant. Harrison continued. He controls nearly 15% of our investment portfolio directly, and his influence extends to another 20% through connected parties. His withdrawal would create substantial instability. I understand the math. Then perhaps you can help us understand the decision. Harrison's tone hardened slightly. You cancelled a wedding that represented a strategic alliance worth hundreds of millions in potential partnerships. You did so without consulting anyone. And the reasons you have provided, while personal, do not address the business implications. Caleb looked around the table. 12 faces. 12 people who measured value in quarterly returns and market positioning. 12 people who had never asked him a single question about his personal life in 8 years of meetings. I have children. He said. Twins. 5 years old. I discovered their existence the day I cancelled the wedding. The silence that followed was absolute. I understand that this is not a business consideration in the traditional sense. Caleb continued. But I am telling you because you deserve to know the full picture. I did not cancel the wedding on a whim. I cancelled it because I realized I had been building my life on a foundation of avoidance and emotional dishonesty. And that kind of foundation eventually collapses, in business and in everything else. Harrison exchanged glances with the other board members. How does this affect your capacity to lead? It does not diminish it. If anything, it clarifies my priorities. I have spent 8 years building this company through relentless focus and calculated risk. I will continue to do that. But I will also be restructuring my personal involvement to allow for greater delegation. I want to build something that does not require my presence in every meeting and my approval on every decision. You are stepping back. I am building resilience. Caleb leaned forward. Robert Hartwell is threatening to destroy us because I did not marry his daughter. That level of vulnerability to any single investor is a structural weakness I should have addressed years ago. His withdrawal, if it happens, will hurt. But it will not destroy us. And when we emerge from it, we will be stronger for not being beholden to anyone's personal vendettas. The board debated for 3 hours. In the end, they agreed to a 6-month evaluation period. Caleb would retain his position but with increased oversight. Monthly check-ins on his personal stability. Quarterly reviews of his strategic decisions. It was humiliating for a man who had built an empire on his own instincts, but it was also fair. He had made a choice that affected thousands of employees and billions in assets. Accountability was reasonable. What none of them knew was that Caleb had already begun the restructuring process. Quiet conversations with loyal executives. Subtle reallocation of responsibilities. The groundwork for a company that could thrive without his constant presence. Because he was going to need that flexibility. He was going to need time. The video call started 2 days after he returned to New York. Misty had agreed to twice-weekly calls, 15 minutes each, with strict parameters. Age-appropriate conversation only. No promises he could not keep. No gifts sent without prior approval. No undermining her authority or contradicting her parenting decisions. The first call was awkward in ways that made Caleb want to crawl out of his skin. He sat in his home office, camera positioned to show the bookshelves behind him because he had read somewhere that visible books made adults seem more trustworthy to children. King and Kyra appeared on his screen sitting at their kitchen table, Misty visible in the background pretending to wash dishes but obviously listening to every word. Hi. Caleb managed. Hi. King replied, his tone carefully neutral. Hi. Kyra echoed, slightly more enthusiastic but still cautious. The silence stretched for approximately 400 years, or possibly just 8 seconds. How was school today? Caleb asked, immediately regretting the generic question. Fine. King said. We learned about caterpillars. Kyra offered. They turn into butterflies. But first they turn into soup inside the cocoon. Like actual soup. Their whole body melts. That is fascinating. Caleb latched onto the topic with desperate gratitude. Do you know what that process is called? Metamorphosis. King said, unable to resist showing off his knowledge. It comes from Greek words meaning transformation. Exactly right. Caleb felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with business accomplishments. Some caterpillars completely dissolve everything except their imaginal discs. Those are the cells that contain the blueprint for the butterfly. Everything else gets recycled. Gross. Kyra said happily. I love it. The conversation flowed more easily after that. They discussed the science of transformation and the architecture of cocoons. They debated whether butterflies remembered being caterpillars. Kyra shared her theory that butterflies were actually reincarnated dragons, which led to a detailed explanation of her dragon mythology that made absolutely no logical sense and was completely captivating. By the end of 15 minutes, Caleb felt like he had run a marathon. Every question had been a potential landmine. Every response from the children had been a gift he was not sure he deserved. Same time Thursday? He asked as the call wound down. If you remember. King said, and there was a challenge in it. I will remember. Caleb promised. I am putting it in my calendar right now. Look. He held up his phone, showing the calendar entry. Call with King and Kyra. Blocked in purple, which was Kyra's favorite color. Okay. King aloud. We will see. The screen went dark. Caleb sat in the silence of his expensive office and felt, for the first time in years, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The calls continued. Twice a week became a rhythm. Caleb structured his entire schedule around those 15-minute windows, canceling meetings that conflicted and refusing to reschedule for any reason. His assistant thought he had lost his mind. Sir, the Singapore investors want to meet on Thursday at 3. They are flying in specifically for this. Move it to Friday. Caleb replied without looking up from his laptop. They cannot do Friday. They have commitments. Then we will do it over video. Or they can wait until next week. Thursday at 3 is not available. May I ask what is happening on Thursday at 3 that cannot be rescheduled? I am calling my children. The assistant stared at him for a moment, recalibrating everything she thought she knew about her employer. Then she nodded and left to rearrange the Singapore meeting. The calls evolved over the weeks. King started showing his building designs, holding his sketchbook up to the camera and explaining the structural considerations with increasing confidence. Caleb asked questions that demonstrated genuine interest and genuine knowledge. They developed a shared language around architecture that felt like the beginning of something real. Kyra's contributions were different but equally valuable. She performed songs she had learned at school, slightly off-key and entirely committed. She introduced him to each of her dragon figurines individually, explaining their personalities and their roles in the Dragon Kingdom. She asked questions about his life that caught him off guard. Do you have any friends? The question came out of nowhere during their 4th week of calls. Friends? Caleb repeated. You know. People you play with. People you tell secrets to. Mama has Janice and Miss Robinson and the ladies from the clinic. Who do you have? The honest answer was devastating. I have colleagues. Caleb said carefully. People I work with. We talk about business and sometimes we eat meals together. That is not the same. Kyra observed with childlike clarity. That is just co-workers. I mean real friends. The kind who come over and watch movies and know your favorite ice cream flavor. I am not sure I have those kinds of friends. He admitted. I used to. A long time ago. But I got so focused on work that I let those relationships fade. That sounds lonely. It is. Caleb agreed. I am hoping to change that. Well. Kyra considered this seriously. If you get better at being a dad, maybe you can practice being a friend too. It is kind of the same skills. Listening and showing up and remembering things that matter. Out of the mouths of children. Misty's voice came from off camera, and Caleb could hear the smile in it even though he could not see her face. She is right. He said. She is absolutely right. 1 month after the train station, Caleb flew back to Philadelphia for his first in-person visit since the hospital. The parameters had been negotiated extensively. A trip to the Franklin Institute, which King had been begging to visit. Lunch afterward. Then the Natural History Museum section on architecture, because Misty had learned there was one and thought it might be relevant to King's interests. Caleb arrived at her house at 9 in the morning, driving a rental car that was deliberately modest. No drivers. No entourage. Just a man in casual clothes holding 2 carefully selected presents. Kyra answered the door before he could knock, clearly having watched for his arrival through the window. You came. She announced, then turned and yelled into the house. Mama, he is here. He actually came. I said I would. Caleb replied, and Kyra gave him a look that suggested she was still evaluating whether his words matched his actions. King appeared behind her, trying to look casual and failing. I am ready. I have been ready for an hour. Can we go now? Let the man get inside the house first. Misty's voice preceded her down the hallway. Come in. Do you want coffee before we leave? The house was small but immaculate. Clean lines and organized spaces and children's artwork on every available wall surface. Caleb recognized Kyra's dragons immediately, but there were also King's building sketches and something that looked like a collaborative piece involving dragons attacking a skyscraper. They made that together. Misty explained, catching his gaze. When they could not agree on what to draw, they decided to draw a battle between their 2 interests. Who won? Caleb asked. Nobody wins in a dragon versus architecture battle. King said seriously. The dragon destroys the building, but then it has nowhere to live. Both sides lose. It is a commentary on the futility of conflict. Caleb stared at his son. Did you just make a statement about the futility of conflict? Mrs. Patterson taught us about themes in art. King shrugged. I am applying the concept. He is 5. Caleb said to Misty. He is 5 and he is making thematic artistic statements. 6 next month. King corrected. And I am advanced for my age. My teacher says so. Humble too. Kyra muttered, and King shot her a look that promised sibling retribution later. Before we continue with this day that is about to create memories none of them will ever forget, I need to pause and speak directly to you. We are at a turning point in this story. Caleb has spent a month showing up, keeping promises, learning to be present in ways he never was before. He has taken the criticism and the skepticism and the testing from everyone around him. And today, he gets to be physically present with his children for the first time since that impossible train ride. But here is the question that haunts me. Can people really change? Or do we just get better at performing the version of ourselves we think others want to see? If you have ever given someone a second chance, or desperately wished someone would give you one, drop a comment right now telling me about it. I read every single comment, and your stories fuel these narratives. And if you are watching without subscribing, hit that button now. This story is about to take turns you will not see coming, and I do not want you to miss any of it. Now, back to Philadelphia, where a man who has everything is trying to prove he deserves the only things that matter. The Franklin Institute exceeded every expectation. King moved through the exhibits with the intensity of a scholar conducting research rather than a child on an outing. He asked questions the docents could not answer. He made connections between exhibits that the curators had never considered. He stood in front of a model of the Golden Gate Bridge for 17 minutes, analyzing its suspension system until Kyra threatened mutiny. I want to see the planetarium. She announced. King has been staring at bridge cables forever. They are not just cables. King protested. They are engineering marvels. Each main cable contains over 27,000 individual wires bundled together. The tensile strength is boring. Kyra cut him off. Planetarium. Now. Children. Misty intervened with practiced patience. We will see both. Kyra gets to pick the next exhibit, but we finish this one first. 2 more minutes, King. King nodded reluctantly and returned his attention to the bridge model. Caleb stood beside him, watching his son absorb information like a sponge absorbing water. Would you want to see the real thing someday? Caleb asked quietly. The Golden Gate Bridge. In person. King looked at him with careful hope. Really? Really? If your mom agrees. We could make a trip of it. See the bridge and the Transamerica Pyramid and the Palace of Fine Arts. San Francisco has incredible architecture. What is the Transamerica Pyramid? King asked, and Caleb could hear the hunger for knowledge in his voice. It is a 48-story skyscraper shaped like a pointed pyramid. It was controversial when it was built because people thought it did not fit with the city's aesthetic. But now it is one of the most recognizable buildings in America. I want to see it. King decided. I want to see all of it. Then we will make it happen. Caleb promised. Someday. When the time is right. The planetarium show made Kyra cry, but in a good way. Something about the vastness of the universe and the smallness of their place in it resonated with her creative soul. She held Caleb's hand in the dark without asking permission, and he felt something crack open in his chest that had been sealed for far too long. Lunch was pizza at a place Misty chose, casual and noisy and nothing like the restaurants Caleb usually frequented. The children debated toppings with the ferocity of contract negotiations. King wanted pepperoni and mushroom. Kyra wanted plain cheese. The compromise of half and half required extensive mediation. How is your pizza? Caleb asked Kyra, who had claimed the cheese half with territorial intensity. Perfect. She said through a mouthful. Pizza is my favorite food. What is yours? Caleb realized he did not have an answer. When was the last time he had thought about something as simple as a favorite food? His meals were scheduled and optimized, selected by nutritionists to maximize energy and minimize waste. The concept of favorites had been eliminated from his life along with everything else that did not serve a purpose. I am not sure. He admitted. I have not thought about it in a long time. That is sad. Kyra said, in the matter-of-fact way children have of stating devastating truths. Everyone should have a favorite food. It is part of being a person. What do you think my favorite food should be? Caleb asked, genuinely curious. Kyra considered this seriously. Dragons like meat, so you should probably like steak or something. But you seem more like a pasta person to me. Pasta is good for people who think too much. It is comforting. Pasta it is then. Caleb said. Thank you for helping me figure that out. You are welcome. Kyra returned to her pizza, satisfied with her contribution to his personal development. The Natural History Museum's architecture section was smaller than King had hoped but more detailed than he had expected. He spent an hour examining models of ancient Roman aqueducts and Gothic cathedrals and modern skyscrapers, asking questions that Caleb was increasingly able to answer. At some point, Misty drifted away to look at another exhibit, leaving Caleb alone with both children for the first time. He did not realize it had happened until he turned around and found her gone. For a moment, panic flared. What if something happened? What if the children needed something he could not provide? What if he failed this test he had not known he was taking? But King was explaining flying buttresses to Kyra, who was listening with more patience than usual. And Kyra was nodding along, occasionally asking questions that suggested genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. And nothing terrible was happening at all. Caleb let himself breathe. Why are you smiling? King asked, catching his expression. Because you two are explaining architecture to each other. And nobody made you do it. You are just sharing something because you want to. King considered this. I am sharing because Kyra does not understand structural support systems and she needs to know why buildings do not fall down. It is educational. It is also nice. Kyra added. When you explain it without being a know-it-all about it. I am not a know-it-all. King protested. You are literally the definition of a know-it-all. At least I know things. Some people just draw dragons all day. Dragons are important. Art is important. Not everything has to be about facts and measurements. They were bickering, but there was love underneath it. Caleb recognized the pattern from siblings he had observed but never understood. The conflict was a language of its own, a way of saying I see you and I am connected to you without having to be vulnerable about it. Both things are important. Caleb interjected. Buildings need engineers to design them and artists to make them beautiful. The best structures are both functional and meaningful. Like falling water. King said. Like falling water. Caleb agreed. Frank Lloyd Wright understood that a house should not just stand up. It should feel like it belongs where it is. It should make the people inside it feel something. Kyra looked at him with new interest. You actually understand art? I understand that art matters. Which is not the same as understanding how to create it. Your mother showed me some of your stories. The Dragon Princess mythology. I think what you are doing is important. Really? Really? Stories help people understand themselves. They help people feel less alone. The world needs people who can create those kinds of stories. Kyra beamed at him, and Caleb felt something warm spread through his chest. It was validation, but not the kind he was used to. Not the validation of closed deals and rising stock prices. The validation of a child believing, even for a moment, that he saw her clearly. Misty returned from whatever exhibit she had been pretending to look at. Everyone ready to head home? She asked. Can he come? Kyra asked immediately. To our house. For dinner. Misty's expression flickered with something complicated. She had agreed to the museum trip. She had not agreed to extending the day further. Please, Mama. King added his voice to the request, which surprised everyone, including himself. He could tell us more about architecture. And we could show him our room. Caleb caught Misty's eye. It is completely up to you. He said quietly. I do not want to overstep. She studied him for a long moment, seeing something he could not name. Then she sighed, the sound of someone making peace with inevitability. Fine. She said. Dinner. But nothing fancy. We are having leftover soup and grilled cheese. That sounds perfect. Caleb replied, and meant it. The house felt different with all of them in it together. King gave Caleb a tour of his bedroom with the intensity of a museum curator introducing a major collection. Every drawing on the wall had a story. Every book on the shelf had significance. The Lego sets on his desk were organized by architectural style rather than by color or size. This is my favorite. King said, pointing to a complex structure that combined elements of Gothic cathedrals with modern skyscraper design. I call it the Dragon Cathedral. I made it for Kyra because she said churches were boring and needed more dragons. There are dragon heads on the spires. Caleb observed, crouching to examine it more closely. And the windows have dragon wing patterns in the brickwork. That is remarkable attention to detail. King shrugged, trying to appear modest and failing. I like details. Kyra's room was the opposite aesthetic but equally personal. Purple dominated everything. Dragons in various forms covered every surface. Stuffed dragons. Plastic dragons. Dragons she had drawn and cut out and taped to the walls. A canopy over her bed made of purple fabric that she explained was a dragon wing protecting her while she slept. Queen Amethyst lives here. Kyra said, pointing to a prominent spot on her bookshelf where a purple dragon figurine stood guard. She watches over the whole kingdom. All my other dragons report to her. What happens when she is not here? Caleb asked. Sir Obsidian takes charge. Kyra pointed to a black dragon on the next shelf. But he is more of a warrior than a leader. Queen Amethyst is strategic. The vocabulary was surprising for a 5-year-old. Caleb wondered how much of it came from the books Misty read to her and how much came from natural absorption of language patterns. Dinner was exactly what Misty had promised. Leftover vegetable soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. They ate at a small kitchen table that required everyone to sit close together, elbows occasionally bumping, the intimacy of family meals Caleb had never experienced as a child. His own family dinners had been formal affairs. Multiple courses served by staff. Conversations about business and performance expectations. Affection was scarce and praise was earned only through achievement. He had not realized until this moment how hungry he was for something different. "This is delicious," he said, meaning the soup but also meaning something larger he could not articulate. "It is just soup," Misty replied, but there was a warmth in her voice that had not been there before. "Sometimes the best things are just simple things done well." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something in her expression that made his heart stumble. After dinner, the children insisted on showing Caleb their nighttime routine. Teeth brushing first, a process that required supervision and multiple reminders. Then pajamas, which the twins were allowed to choose for themselves and which therefore never matched anything. Then stories, the part Kyra had been most excited about. "Mama reads to us every night," she explained, climbing into her bed while King settled into his across the room. "We take turns choosing the book. Tonight is my night." "What are we reading?" Caleb asked, settling into the chair Misty usually occupied. "The Tale of Custard the Dragon," Kyra announced. "It is a poem about a dragon who everyone thinks is a coward, but he is actually the bravest one when it matters." Caleb took the book she offered and began to read. The poem was simple and rhythmic, telling the story of a little girl named Belinda and her pets, including Custard the dragon who cried for nice safe cages while the other pets bragged about how brave they were. When a pirate arrived, all the brave pets fled except Custard, who gobbled up the pirate and saved everyone. By the end, both children were struggling to keep their eyes open. Kyra's were already closed. King was fighting sleep with visible determination. "I liked when you read," Kyra murmured. "You did the voices." "I will do them again next time," Caleb promised, then caught himself. "If there is a next time." "There will be a next time," King said quietly, his eyes finally closing. "You can come back." It was permission. It was acceptance. It was everything Caleb had been working toward without realizing it. He sat with them until they were fully asleep, then crept out of the room to find Misty in the kitchen, cleaning up the dinner dishes. "Thank you," he said. "For today. For letting me be part of it. They asked for you to stay." Misty replied without turning around. "I was not going to say no to something they wanted that badly." "Still. You could have found a reason. You chose not to." She turned then, dish towel in hand, her expression complicated. "You were good with them today," she admitted. "Patient. Present. Interested in what they cared about rather than trying to redirect their attention to what you thought was important. I am interested in what they care about. They are fascinating people. Both of them. Completely different from each other and completely themselves." Misty set down the dish towel and leaned against the counter. "When I found out I was pregnant," she said quietly, "I spent weeks trying to figure out how to tell you. I wrote letters. I made phone calls I never completed. I drove past your office building 3 times before I gave up." "What stopped you?" "Fear," she admitted. "Fear that you would want to be involved and would be terrible at it. Fear that you would not want to be involved at all and would confirm every worst thing I believed about you. Fear that your world would swallow them up and I would lose them to nannies and boarding schools and all the things rich people do to avoid the inconvenience of actually parenting. Those are reasonable fears." "They were," she agreed. "But watching you today." She paused, gathering words. "Watching you read to them and ask questions and sit still while King explained things you already knew. I started to wonder if I was wrong." "You were not wrong," Caleb said carefully. "The man I was 6 years ago would have been exactly who you feared. I would have thrown money at the problem. I would have hired people to handle the parts one did not want to do. I would have been present when it was convenient and absent when it was not. And now? Now I understand that there is nothing in my life more important than showing up for them. Not my company. Not my reputation. Not my comfort. They matter more than all of it combined." Misty studied him for a long moment. The silence stretched between them, full of history and hurt and something else. Something that might have been the beginning of trust. "You can come back next weekend," she said finally. "Same arrangement. If you want to." "I want to," he said. "More than anything." "Good." She walked past him toward the hallway. "I will walk you out." At the door, Caleb paused. Misty. He said her name like it was something precious. I know I cannot undo what happened between us. I know I destroyed something that could have been beautiful. But I need you to know that I am not trying to win you back. I am just trying to be worthy of them. Whatever happens between us beyond co-parenting, I accept that it is your choice completely. She was quiet for a moment. I appreciate that. She said finally. It is good to know you understand the boundaries. He nodded and stepped out into the Philadelphia night. Behind him, the door closed softly. In front of him stretched a future that was uncertain but somehow full of possibility. The weekends became a rhythm. Caleb would fly in Friday evening and stay through Sunday. He found an extended stay hotel that became familiar. He learned the layout of Misty's neighborhood. He discovered the best coffee shop, the park where the children liked to play, the library where Kyra participated in story time. Each visit built on the last. King's architectural discussions became more sophisticated. Kyra's dragon mythology expanded to include increasingly complex political dynamics. The children's initial wariness softened into something approaching anticipation. He called every Tuesday and Thursday, never missing, never cutting short, never letting business interfere. 3 months in, the children started calling him Dad. It happened without fanfare. Kyra said it first during a video call, casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Dad, can you explain cantilevers to King again? He is trying to design a bridge but the math is not working. Caleb froze. Dad. The word echoed in his chest like a bell ringing in an empty cathedral. Dad? King repeated from off-screen, testing the word himself. Yeah, that works. Dad. And just like that, he was their father not just biologically but functionally. Actually. Really. He cried after that call ended. Sat in his Manhattan penthouse and wept like he had not wept since childhood. Relief and joy and grief for the years he had missed all tangled together into something that overwhelmed every defense he had ever constructed. 4 months in, the tabloid story broke. Billionaire's secret family. Caleb Smith hides love children from public. The photos were invasive. Caleb and the children at the Franklin Institute. Caleb reading to them through a window someone had photographed from outside the house. Caleb holding Kyra's hand as they crossed a Philadelphia street. The speculation was wild and mostly wrong. Claims of affairs and cover-ups and deliberate deception. Anonymous sources suggesting Misty was a gold digger who had manufactured a pregnancy to trap a wealthy man. Theories that Caleb had known about the children all along and hidden them for business reasons. Misty called him before he had finished reading the articles. Did you see? Her voice was tight with controlled fury. I am looking at it now. He said. I am so sorry. This is exactly what you were afraid of. My world invading yours. Someone photographed through our window. She said. Our window, Caleb. Into our house. Where my children sleep. I know. I am already calling my security team. We will have people there within the hour. And I am contacting my lawyers. Whoever took those photos violated multiple laws. The children have not seen it yet. They are at school. But by the time they get home, everyone in their class will know. Parents talk. Kids talk. They are going to be harassed about this. I will fix it. He promised. I will fix all of it. How? How do you fix something that is already out there? How do you unring a bell? He did not have an answer. But he knew he had to find one. The next 72 hours were chaos managed. Caleb flew to Philadelphia immediately, business obligations abandoned without a second thought. He hired private security for the house. He retained the best PR firm in the country to manage the narrative. He called in favors from media contacts he had cultivated over years of business dealings. The legal counterattack was swift and merciless. The photographer who had taken the images was identified and served with a lawsuit within 24 hours. The tabloid that published them received a cease and desist that made their lawyers blanch. Criminal complaints were filed for stalking and invasion of privacy. But the real damage control happened publicly. Caleb released a statement that was honest in ways that made his PR team uncomfortable. 5 months ago, I discovered I had children I never knew existed. Twin children, now nearly 6 years old, whose mother had raised them alone after I made choices that destroyed our relationship. My children's mother owed me nothing. She kept them from me not out of malice but out of protection. The fears she had about my world invading their safety have proven justified by the events of this week. I am not going to discuss the details of our family situation further. My children deserve privacy. Their mother deserves respect. I ask only that the media show the same consideration for them that they would want for their own families. If anyone has questions about my fitness to leave my company, the answer is simple. I have never been more fit than I am now. Because I finally understand what matters. And it is not quarterly returns. The statement went viral. Not because of the scandal, but because of the vulnerability. Billionaires did not typically admit to failure. They did not acknowledge that they had made choices that destroyed relationships. They did not prioritize children over corporate perception. Something shifted in the public narrative. Within a week, the story had transformed from billionaire scandal to billionaire redemption arc. Think pieces emerged about single mothers and absent fathers and the possibility of genuine change. Parenting blogs discussed what it meant to show up late to fatherhood but to show up completely. The attention was uncomfortable, but it was also protective. The same media that had invaded their privacy now served as a shield. Anyone who tried to harass the family further faced immediate backlash from audiences who had decided that Caleb and Misty were worth rooting for. In the middle of it all, Misty called him. "You did not have to go public," she said. "You could have managed this quietly. Paid people off. Made it go away." "I did not want it to go away," Caleb replied. "I wanted to own it. My choices led to this. Not yours. Not theirs. Mine. And if I am going to ask you to trust me, I had to show you that I will stand up and take responsibility when things go wrong." She was quiet for a long moment. "The security team is very professional," she said finally. "The children think they are bodyguards from a movie." "Good. I told them to make it feel like an adventure rather than a threat." King asked if we are famous now. "Like the Kardashians." "What did you tell him?" "I told him we are private people who had something private become public. And that some people find our story interesting. And that it does not change who we are, just who knows about us." "That is a good answer. I have had practice explaining complicated things." She paused. "Thank you. For handling it the way you did. I was so angry when it happened. But you made it better instead of worse. I will always try to make things better instead of worse." Caleb promised. "That is the job now. Being someone who makes things better." 5 months in, Caleb made a decision. He called Misty on a Thursday evening, outside their normal schedule. She answered with immediate concern in her voice. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," he assured her. "I just needed to talk to you about something. Without the kids present." "That sounds serious." "It is. But it is good serious. I hope." He took a breath, gathering courage for what he was about to say. "I have been thinking about sustainability." He began. The back and forth. New York to Philadelphia every weekend. Video calls twice a week. It is better than nothing, but it is not enough. I am missing things. The everyday things. Homework help and bedtime stories and Saturday morning cartoons. I want to be present for the ordinary moments, not just the special occasions. "What are you saying?" "I am opening a Philadelphia office," he said. "For real. Not a satellite location with occasional visits. A full operation that I can run from here. It will take a few months to set up, but when it is done, I will be able to spend most of my time in Philadelphia. 3 weeks out of every month, at least. More, eventually." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Caleb wondered if the call had dropped. "You would move to Philadelphia," Misty finally said. "You would leave New York. Give up your penthouse and your network and your whole life there. For them." "For them," he confirmed. "And for me. Because my life in New York was never a life. It was a holding pattern. I was just existing between accomplishments, waiting for something to mean something. This means something. Caleb. Her voice was strange, thick with emotion he could not identify. This is a big decision. I have been thinking about it for months. Since that first weekend when King showed me his dragon cathedral and Kyra made me figure out my favorite food. I knew then that I was looking at my future. It just took me time to figure out how to get there. What about your company? The company does not need me in Manhattan. It needs me functional. And I am more functional when I am close to them. When I have something to work toward that matters more than profit margins. The silence returned, but it felt different now. Charged with something Caleb could not quite name. When would this happen? Misty asked. I am looking at properties next week. If I find something suitable, I could be operational within 3 months. That is fast. I have wasted enough time. He said. I am not interested in wasting more. Another pause. Then, quietly. Okay. 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 I believe you. I believe this is real. I believe you are actually going to do this. You believe me? I have been watching you for 5 months. She said. Waiting for you to slip up. Waiting for the mask to fall off. Waiting to see the man who hurt me emerge from behind the father who keeps showing up. But he has not emerged. Because maybe he is not there anymore. Maybe you actually changed. I did. He said. I am still changing. Every day. I see that now. She paused. Come for dinner on Friday. We will tell the children together. He sat in his Manhattan penthouse after the call ended, looking at the city skyline he had stared at for years. It had never felt like home. It had felt like achievement. Like proof. Like the physical manifestation of everything he had worked to become. But it was not home. Home was a small house in Philadelphia where 2 children were probably sleeping right now, dreaming of dragons and bridges and a future where their father was present. He started packing that night. All right, we have reached a moment in this story where I need to hear from you. Caleb has relocated his entire life, spent 5 months proving himself, and earned something that looks dangerously close to trust from the woman he destroyed. Here is my question. If you were Misty, would you take him back? Not just as a co-parent, but as a partner. The man broke her heart in the worst possible way. He chose someone else. But he also spent 5 months showing up every single day, keeping every promise, becoming the father those children deserve. Drop your answer in the comments right now. I want to know. Do you believe in second chances? Or are some betrayals unforgivable? And if you are enjoying this journey, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear that redemption is possible. Now, back to Philadelphia, where a family is about to become official. The children's reaction was everything Caleb could have hoped for. You are going to live here. Kyra's voice hit a register usually reserved for meeting Disney princesses. Like actually here. In Philadelphia. Near us. Near you. Caleb confirmed. Close enough that I can come to dinner on regular weeknights. Close enough to help with homework and attend school plays and be there for ordinary things, not just special occasions. This is the best day ever. Kyra launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his waist with surprising strength for a 5-year-old. The best day in the history of days. King's reaction was more measured, but his eyes betrayed his excitement. How close? He asked. Like walking distance close or driving distance close? I am looking at houses about 3 miles from here. Close enough that you could ride your bikes over when you are old enough. If your mom agrees. That is very close. King processed this information. We could see you all the time. That is the plan. King nodded slowly, and then he did something he had never done before. He walked over to Caleb and hugged him. A real hug. The kind that said I accept you and I am glad you are staying and please do not leave again, all without words. Caleb held his son and felt the last 6 years of emptiness begin to fill with something warm and permanent. The house Caleb found was perfect in its imperfection. 3 bedrooms, because the twins needed their own space when they stayed over. A home office with good light. A backyard with a tire swing and space for the garden Kyra immediately wanted to plant. Nothing ostentatious. Nothing that screamed wealth. Just a comfortable home in a good neighborhood, close to the family that mattered. He hired local contractors for the renovation work. He bought furniture from regular stores instead of commissioning custom pieces. He asked the children's opinions on paint colors and curtain fabrics and where to put the bookshelf that would hold King's architecture collection. Their rooms were decorated with their input. King wanted blueprints on his walls and a drafting table by the window. Kyra wanted purple everything and a reading nook shaped like a dragon's cave. Caleb made it all happen, not by throwing money at decorators but by spending weekends with the children, building and painting and creating spaces that felt like theirs. 6 months after the train station, Caleb moved in. The housewarming was small. Just Misty and the children and Janice and Misty's mother, who had recovered fully and regarded Caleb with slightly less suspicion than before. They ate pizza in the living room and the children gave tours of their rooms and Kyra insisted on christening the tire swing before dark. It was the best day of Caleb's life. Better than the day his company went public. Better than the day he made his first billion. Better than any achievement he had ever celebrated. Because it was not an achievement. It was a beginning. That night, after the children had been returned to Misty's house and the guests had departed, Caleb sat on his new porch looking at stars he had never seen from Manhattan. His phone buzzed. A text from Misty. The kids are still talking about their rooms. King is already planning modifications. He smiled and typed back. Let me know what he wants. I will make it happen. You do not have to do everything he asks. I know. But I want to. I missed so many things. I want to give them whatever I can now. There was a pause. Then. You are doing well. I wanted you to know that. I see how hard you are trying. Thank you. That means more than you know. Another pause. Longer this time. Would you want to have dinner? Just us. Next week. The kids will be at my mom's. Caleb stared at the message. His heart rate accelerated in ways it had not since his first major business pitch. I would like that very much. He typed back. Good. Saturday. 7. I will send you the address. It was not a reconciliation. It was just dinner. But it was also something more. A door opening. A possibility emerging. The beginning of something that might become everything if he did not mess it up. Saturday arrived with agonizing slowness. Caleb changed his outfit 4 times. He was a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, and he was nervous about dinner with a woman who had already seen him at his worst. The restaurant Misty chose was quiet and intimate. The kind of place where conversations could happen without interruption. She was already there when he arrived, seated at a corner table, wearing a dress he had never seen before. She looked beautiful. She had always looked beautiful. But there was something different now. A softness that had not been there before. Or maybe he was just seeing her clearly for the first time. Hi. He said, sliding into the seat across from her. Hi. She smiled, and the warmth in it made something flutter in his chest. They talked for hours. Not about the children, though they came up occasionally. About themselves. About who they had been and who they had become. About the years apart and what they had learned from them. I thought about you. Misty admitted over dessert. More than I wanted to. Even when I hated you, I thought about you. Wondered what might have been different if you had been different. I thought about you too. Caleb replied. Every relationship I had after you felt like a poor imitation. I kept looking for what we had and never finding it. Because what we had was real. Even when it was painful. Even when it ended badly. It was real in a way nothing else has been. Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. She did not pull away. I am not asking you to forget what happened. He said. I am not asking you to pretend the past did not hurt. I am just asking if there might be room for something new. Something built on who we are now rather than who we were then. I have been asking myself the same question. She admitted. 4 weeks. Trying to figure out if I am strong enough to risk it. You are the strongest person I have ever known. She laughed softly. Strength is not about being unafraid. It is about being terrified and doing it anyway. Then be terrified with me. He suggested. We can figure it out together. Misty looked at their joined hands. Then at his face. Then at something only she could see. Okay. She said quietly. Let us figure it out together. They left the restaurant holding hands. It felt like the most natural thing in the world and also like the bravest thing either of them had ever done. The relationship rebuilt slowly, deliberately, with none of the rushed intensity of their first romance. They dated like teenagers. Dinners and movies and long walks where they talked about everything and nothing. They did not rush physical intimacy. They did not make declarations or promises. They just spent time together, learning who the other person had become. The children noticed, of course. Children always notice. Are you and Mom boyfriend and girlfriend now? Kyra asked during a weekend visit. We are figuring that out. Caleb answered honestly. Do you have feelings about it? I think it would be good. Kyra decided. Then we could be a real family. With everyone living together and having breakfast and stuff. That might happen someday. If your mom wants it. But we are not rushing anything. King's perspective was more analytical. Statistically. He said during one of their architecture discussions. Children do better when they have stable two-parent households. The research is clear. You have been researching family structures. I research everything. I wanted to understand what was optimal. And what did you conclude? That optimal is not about numbers. It is about consistency and presence and emotional availability. Whether that comes from one parent or two or grandparents or other family members, the key factors remain the same. That sounds like wisdom beyond your years. King shrugged. I read a lot. 8 months after the train station, Caleb proposed. Not with a grand gesture. He had learned that Misty did not need or want grand gestures. She wanted consistency. Presence. Actions that matched words. He proposed in her kitchen, on a Sunday morning, while the children were still asleep and they were cooking breakfast together. He did not get down on one knee. He just stopped in the middle of flipping pancakes and looked at her with everything he felt written on his face. I want to spend the rest of my life showing up for you. He said. For all of you. I want to make breakfast on Sunday mornings and help with homework on Wednesday nights and be the person you call when things are hard. I want to be your partner in everything. If you will have me. Misty stared at him. Then she laughed, a sound full of joy and disbelief. You are proposing while holding a spatula. I am. With pancake batter on your shirt. He looked down. There was indeed pancake batter on his shirt. The moment felt right. He said. I did not want to wait for a perfect setting. Perfect settings are not real. This is real. Us, in a kitchen, building something together. That is what I want. Forever. She crossed the space between them and kissed him. The spatula dropped. The pancakes burned. Neither of them noticed. Yes. She said against his lips. Yes. I will marry you. The wedding was small by any standard and microscopic by billionaire standards. They held it in Misty's mother's backyard, under a canopy of string lights that the children had helped hang. 50 guests, all people who actually mattered. No media. No business associates invited for networking purposes. Just family and friends who had witnessed the journey and believed in the destination. King served as ring bearer with the seriousness of someone guarding nuclear codes. Kyra was flower girl, scattering purple petals down the aisle while her dragon backpack sat in a place of honor on the front row. The vows were simple and honest. I promise to choose you. Caleb said. Every day. Even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. I promise to show up and stay present and never stop working to deserve your trust. I promise to let you in. Misty replied. Completely. Even when I am scared. I promise to believe in your capacity to change and to hold space for you to keep becoming who you are meant to be. They kissed, and the small crowd erupted in cheers. Kyra tackled them both in a hug that nearly knocked them over. King stood slightly apart, watching with his analytical gaze, and then nodded with satisfaction. This is optimal. He declared. The research supports this outcome. Thank you for your approval. Caleb laughed. You are welcome. The reception lasted until midnight. The children fell asleep on a pile of cushions in the corner. Misty's mother gave a toast that made everyone cry. Janice declared that she had known from the beginning that things would work out, which was an absolute lie, but nobody called her on it. When the last guest had left and the children had been carried to bed, Caleb and Misty stood in the quiet aftermath, looking at the string lights still twinkling above them. We did it. Misty said softly. We are just beginning. Caleb replied. This is the starting line, not the finish. I know. She turned to face him. But it feels like we have already come so far. From that train station to here. It seems impossible. The best things usually seem impossible until they happen. She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. They went inside together, walking into a future that had seemed impossible 9 months ago but now felt like the only outcome that made sense. 1 year later, they stood on the platform at Grand Central Terminal. It was a deliberate choice, returning to the place where everything had begun. They were on their way to a family vacation, the first real vacation any of them had taken. San Francisco, as Caleb had promised King. The Golden Gate Bridge and the Transamerica Pyramid and all the architectural wonders they had discussed in that tiny train compartment. The children were older now, almost 7. King had grown 2 inches and was currently explaining the engineering of the terminal ceiling to a confused tourist who had made the mistake of asking a simple question. Kyra had added 3 new dragons to her mythology and was dictating their stories into a tablet that Caleb had given her for Christmas. Do you remember? Misty asked, standing beside him on the platform. Where you were standing when you saw me? Right there. Caleb pointed to a spot near the opposite platform. I was about to board a train to my wedding. And then I turned around and saw you. And everything changed. Everything changed. He agreed. Best decision I ever made. You mean the decision to cancel your wedding and chase a woman onto a train without any plan? Exactly that decision. He smiled. Sometimes the impulsive choices are the right ones. King abandoned the tourist and approached them, his expression curious. This is where you met us, right? Where you saw me and Kyra for the first time? This exact platform. Caleb confirmed. What were you thinking? When you first saw us? Caleb considered the question seriously, the way he had learned to consider all of King's questions. I was thinking that everything I believed about my life was wrong. I was thinking that I had been sleepwalking through an existence that looked successful but felt empty. And I was thinking that those 2 children across the platform were the most important thing I had ever seen, even though I had only seen them for 5 seconds. That is a lot to think in 5 seconds. It was not really thinking. It was knowing. Sometimes you just know that everything is about to change. Kyra wandered over, tablet still in hand. Are we telling the train story again? She asked. I like that story. It is like a fairy tale but real. It is not a fairy tale. King corrected. Fairy tales have magic. This is just statistics and probability and 2 people making rational decisions under emotional duress. It is both. Misty interjected. It is a story about people making improbable choices that led to extraordinary outcomes. That is what the best stories are. Impossible things becoming possible. Their train was announced. The family gathered their belongings and headed toward the platform, moving as a unit in the way that families learn to move together over time. At the entrance to the platform, Caleb paused and looked back at the terminal. The cathedral ceiling. The bustling crowds. The clock that had read 4:47 on the day his life had changed. Dad? Kyra tugged at his hand. The train is boarding. Coming. He said, and turned away from the past toward the future that waited on a platform just ahead. They boarded together. Found seats together. Settled in for the first leg of their journey west. Caleb sat between his wife and his children, watching the world blur past the window, and felt something he had not felt since childhood. Complete. And that is where their story continues. Not ends, but continues. Because real love is not a destination. It is a daily choice. A commitment to show up and keep showing up, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. Caleb could have gotten on that train to the Hamptons 1 year ago. He could have married Tiffany and spent his life wondering about the children he glimpsed on a platform. He could have chosen comfort over courage and certainty over possibility. But he chose differently. He chose hard over easy. He chose accountability over convenience. He chose to become someone worth trusting. If this story moved you, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Let the algorithm know that stories about redemption and earned happiness deserve to be seen. Share this with someone who needs to believe that it is never too late to become the person you should have been. And if you have not subscribed to Mr. Dawson's stories yet, what are you waiting for? We tell the truth here. About love. About loss. About the messy work of becoming better than we were. Drop a comment telling me what moment hit you hardest. Was it King's interrogation on the train? Caleb showing up at the recital? The proposal in the kitchen? I read every single comment, and your responses fuel these stories. Until next time, remember. Second chances are real. But only if you are willing to earn them.